So, I just bought a BMX off Facebook Marketplace for 20 quid. It's in a bit of a state and I'm going to refurbish it and make it look good as new. And this is a video about how I do that. So first thing, I'm going to stick it on the rack. I can see by looking at this that the gyro has been disconnected. That is pretty much always the first thing that will break or stop working properly on a BMX that has a gyro, is the spinning gyro brake. Reason for that, typically, whenever the bike's getting built and put together, the person who's building it maybe doesn't know fully how it works and so doesn't really set it up correctly. It'll get set up to a point where the brake will work just about, and then very quickly it stops working. So I'll show you that in a wee second. So bike's on the rack. As you can see, bottom gyro cable disconnected. Now the actual front brake cable has been disconnected from the front brake and is now the back brake, so fair play to that person for sorting that out. I'm going to replace this cable, I'm going to sort it out, I'm going to take the rust off the bolts, I'm going to take the rust off the axles, I'm going to make sure the tires are nice and hard, I'm going to make sure the cranks aren't loose, tighten all the bolts, give it a clean, give it an oil, and it'll basically look and feel good as new by the time I'm done. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take everything off that's either ugly or doesn't work. So bottom gyro cable comes off and goes straight in the bin. And the reason why it's going in the bin is because the end of the cable that we need to use the brake is completely banjaxed. So there isn't any salvageable parts on this, so I can replace this. So I'm going to pop it in the bin. Easy enough to replace, no big deal. This front brake cable is pink, faded from the sun, looks ugly, nobody wants it. Nobody wants a bike that looks neglected, so I'm going to take it off, and it's also going to go in the bin. I have plenty more spares. I envisage this entire process will take probably around an hour, tops. So, tell a lie, I'm not going to entirely throw this out because if I keep this much of a length of the inner wire, I can use that for a new straddle cable. So that now goes into my future repairs pot. The front brake has a lot of pieces missing. It's in pretty bad state, so that's going to come off. Now this does have a lot of useful parts. So these little shim washers, I'm going to keep those. I'm going to keep this little adjuster, because I may come across a better condition brake in future that needs one of these, so it's definitely worth keeping. Brake blocks are really worn, wouldn't consider keeping those. And the spring mechanism's bent, so that can go in the bin now. Okay, so mud guard. A lot of bike shops put these on because parents don't want their kids to have dirty ankles. I think they hide a beautiful chainring, and they break and get bent and become pretty clunky and ugly really quickly, so I'm taking this off. It's also cracked, so it's not worth keeping. Beautiful chainring. Now I can see you. Okay, at this point I'm going to stick gloves on because I don't want to get my hands caked in grease and dirty oil. That's a wee tip that I picked up from my brother, who's a car mechanic. For a long time I always would have just cracked on, had completely stinking hands, grease and oil under my fingernails that I couldn't clean off for donkeys. Started wearing gloves, never again. Love it. Okay, this is a bell that's smashed. It needs to come off, and I'm not going to put one back on. The die-hard BMXer in me doesn't want a bell on a bike that I'd like to see in the skate park. So all these little features, these little reflectors and things that I'm taking off, those are all put on for British standards because it could be cycled on the road. And because it could be cycled on the road, it has to have reflectors, a bell and 2 brakes. So I am going to keep 2 brakes on this. I'm going to put another front cable back on. I'll do that in a wee sec. But at this stage, we've taken off the bits that we don't want. So front gyro cable surprisingly isn't seized, which is good. The bottom bracket is loose. If that was left loose like that for much longer, it would actually destroy the bottom bracket cups. So I'm going to fix that now. I'm going to take the reflectors off the wheels. If anybody in future wants to put them back on, no problem, they can have them, but I don't want them on this. No, that one's not coming back to life. Now I'm going to see, yeah, I'm going to move this back a wee here, just so you can see more of what I'm doing. It's not a very wide angle lens. Okay, I'm just going to check over everything right now. Let's see how it's working. So that back brake's not too bad actually. The cassette hub's got a decent click. There's no play in the rear hub. That's always a plus. So what I want to do first is I want to take the rock out of the bottom bracket. This is the point at which my workbench becomes a complete mess because I'm just pulling tools off the wall to sort what I need. Okay, that's our bottom bracket the way I want it. Beautiful. So all of the crank arm bolts need to come out, get it clean, get the rust off, grease them, put them back in. So this bike has been outside quite a bit, but it doesn't look to have spent its entire life outside. So that's pretty ugly, and that's got a lot of gack going on inside the bolt heads, but also rusty too. So I'm going to go to the bench. I'm going to break out my WD-40 and my old toothbrush, because it is perfect for cleaning these. Okay, so first thing, I'm going to take the rust off that. Very gently clamp it in the vise. And wire brush time. Not bad. So after the wire brush, we touch a WD, get an old toothbrush, give it a clean. Then I will get my extra dirty rag that's already completely saturated with oil. I'll give this a nice rub. And at a glance, that looks as good as new. This is just what I wanted. The threads also have a little touch of rust on them, so I'll get that off. When this goes back into the bike, I'll be using grease on it, so it'll be good anyway. Okay, so crank arm, it's looking a bit rusty and ugly. WD-40 and toothbrush. So that's that cleaned. And then after I've rubbed it with this old rag, then I will finish it with the clean rag, which is the blue one. Kind of dark here, but no rust. No rust. Looks nice. So this pedal is actually loose, so I'm going to tighten that when I'm out. Which looks to be seized, so I'm going to have to fix that on the bike. Now this little part of the pedal can also get a little bit rusty and ugly. So again, I'm going to use my WD-40 toothbrush. Give it a wipe. Good as new. Then I get my grease, pop it on the inside, and back to the stand. So left crank arm's going on. I'm just going to give this spindle a bit of a wipe to get the surface rust off it. There's a lot of grease inside this now, so that's going to be good moving forward. Line it up. Get the bolt. Plenty of grease on the bolt. Back in. Common misconception about these things. You have to swing on that bolt. I mean, like, really tighten it. A lot of places tighten these a little bit, and yes, there is a torque tool and there will be a specific torque tension that you should put this bolt to. But if you simply tighten that really tight, it's pretty hard to strip that bolt. That is as tight as that needs to be. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to move to the right crank arm now. It's actually nowhere near as rusty as the left one, so I'm not taking it off. But I am going to get my WD toothbrush and give things a little clean. And that takes off a bad look on surface rust. So I'm going around the chain ring, around the back of the crank arm. And all these little subtle, tiny removals of rusty spots is what will make someone look at this and just go, yep, that's a good bike, good nick, I like it, it's not rusty, my kid will ride it. And it'll make it very easy to sell. The number one reason that a child wants to stop riding a BMX is because it has started to rust and they think it looks ugly. It's really, really easy to get rid of rust. Just gonna get this crank arm clean. Beautiful, done. Okay, so I'm going to take these pegs off because I need to adjust the position of the back wheel. Thankfully the chain on this isn't rusty, so I'm not going to change it. If it was rusty, it's genuinely not worth the hassle or the effort trying to clean a chain. They're pretty inexpensive and I have a lot of them in the shop here, so I would just stick a new one on if I needed it. So I'm resetting the back wheel here. The chain has got a lot of slack. I want to take the slack out so it's set up correctly and feels good. Swing on these bolts too, they need to be tight. Okay, I am happy with that. Again, tiny bit of surface rust on the rear axle nuts. So, WD-40 toothbrush, give it a clean. Surface rust literally wipes off. It looks ugly until you put a tiny amount of effort into it and you just clean it right up. So the back wheel's reset, this is what I want. Cranks are tight and clean. Now I'm going to give the bike a general wipe over. So there's little bits of literally dust accumulated on this from the years of use. That will literally, for the most part, wipe off. And because this is my sort of oily rag, it is putting that's basically my degreaser here. So I'm always giving it the oily rag wipe and then I'm giving it the clean rag wipe so as not to leave any sort of yucky residue on it. But it's amazing how quickly you can transform the look of a bike by literally giving it a wipe, like what I'm doing now. Funny thing is, I have done this process hundreds of times over the last 20 years. Pick up a bike that somebody doesn't want, doesn't like, looks ugly, give it a clean, work the magic with the WD-40 toothbrush, and comes back to reality, or back to life, I mean. So all these little areas I'm rubbing now are just common gathering points for dust and grime. And it's amazing how quickly and easily it looks great with a simple wipe. Now what you'll maybe notice here, these nuts are rusty, like considerably rusty. So before I actually take off the wheel nuts, I need to clean the axle threads with a wire brush so the nut will come off without damaging any threads. And I keep a good stock of those wheel nuts, so I'm literally just going to change them for brand new ones. Nobody wants to look down at something like that. You can change these for 25p each. Okay, so I'm going to change the wheel nuts. Back to the bench. These little hook washers, I personally think they're not a great idea. They're very easy to damage, and then it allows your wheel to move around a lot, which is quite frustrating. So a little bit of oil on the threads on both sides. I'm going to give it a wipe with my dirty rag to spread that evenly. If you've noticed and are wondering why I've got a fork on the bench, that's also a BMX tool. I need that here. I'll maybe show you why another day. So while I've got the front wheel off and it's on the bench here, again I'm going to give it a wipe. Quick wipe on the rim literally transforms the look of it. Beautiful. So simple, so quick, totally inexpensive, and it dramatically changes the look of the bike just by the fact it looks like it's been cared for. So I'm just going to quickly go in between all the spokes now. A lot of the times when I'm doing a wheel clean, I'll even clean the hub with the WD-40 and toothbrush, but this one today is actually really clean. So I'm basically going to take any oil that I put on the sidewalls and get that off. Pretty bogging. That definitely would not help brake performance. I am, however, going to give the tire sidewalls a quick rub here. Look at that. Bling bling. Okay, so I'm going to put new wheel nuts on this. And I have them here for just such an occasion. also needs washers. I'm a big fan of washers. I'm a washer user. Bikes need washers. Brand new washer, brand new wheel nut. And it will literally be so shiny and clean, it'll catch your eye and instantly tell you this bike's been looked after, because it has shiny bits. Right, so back to the rack. I'm pushing the wheel up with my knee, in case you're wondering what funky position I'm in, to make sure it stays in the middle. Okay. So I've given it a wipe with the dirty rag basically. Now I'm going to go back over it with the clean rag. Front wheel looks good. Frame's looking good. Cranks are clean. All the tubes are clean. One last little thing I want to do now is actually give the brake caliper a bit of a rub, because it can get pretty grubby. These tiny wee bits of maintenance that I'm doing is literally what you should always be doing to your bike all the time, on a bi-weekly or monthly basis. Just go over it, give it a touch up, give it a tune up. You will appreciate it because it will feel good, and when it feels good you'll want to ride it and enjoy it more. Now, because I moved the back wheel, I need to reset the brake block position, which I'm doing now. If I didn't, the brake blocks would hit off the tire and wear it out, and it would sound awful and the brake wouldn't work. So needs done. And that brake block is not mounted correctly. I'm going to show you what I mean when I say the brake block's not mounted correctly. So on a brake block you have these little washers. You have a cup, a dish, and a cup. These sit together on one side of the brake, and these go on top, and they actually move like this, and that is what allows you to position the brake. So dish, cup, cup, dish, and you'll be able to set your brake block to whatever position it needs to be to touch the rim nice and flat. So that'll make it feel good and work good. I do see those out of position all the time, and I would imagine it's quite simply the bolt has come loose on the brake block after the bike has been bought, and it's one of those little things. If you didn't know how to do it, I couldn't blame you for not setting it up right, but seeing as I'm here now, I'm going to do it properly. Okay, so what do I need now? I need a new rear gyro cable, and wouldn't it be awesome if I had one that was red? I'm I'm going to look for one. Back in a sec. Ta-da! The luxuries of currently standing in a BMX shop mean that I can just put my hand on parts. If you were buying something like this as a replacement, you're talking £6. So it's worth the investment, because whenever this gyro is back on and working, it's definitely a selling point. People like gyros because they can spin their handlebars around without the cable being interrupted and the brake still works. Pretty cool little feature. I use it myself on my own BMX. It's mainly, it's to allow you to do tail whip and bar spin tricks without having to constantly turn your handlebars back around. So this cable needs shortened. I'm going to do that now. At this point, I am going to stick some oil on the cable. It makes sense to oil it while you can access it. I was just cutting off a wee snag there. That's what that little noise was. And the noise has stopped. Right. What oil do you use? Any. Not WD-40 at this stage. I'm using 3-in-1 right now. There's a lot of oils on the market that do the job perfectly. So I'll get this in place. This can be a bit fiddly, but when it works, it's worth the hassle. Okay, so I'm connecting the gyro back up now. Cables are in position. I'm going to pull with tension on my finger. That feels pretty much exactly how I want it to feel, which is ideal. Now we're putting the straddle yoke back on. There is technically a right and wrong way to do this. So this little bad boy has a nut on one side. If you put the nut to the top, it makes it really difficult to actually get at it and work at it. So always put the nut to the bottom. That's what I'm going to do now. For this, I'm going to use pointy nose pliers. So I need to pull this forwards whilst also tightening this. That's pretty difficult to do. So I'm going to show you a little hack I've developed. I've got my tri-spanner ready, which is the 10mm I need to tighten that. I'm going to pull this forward, yank the cable back so it's nice and taut. Go in behind it with the pointy nose, hold it very tightly, and it allows me to tighten the nut. And now the brake is set. Perfect. I just need to readjust the tension on the brake springs. That's something that eludes a lot of people and it's pretty frustrating. You can adjust these and adjust the feel of the brake. I really like it when a brake feels good and works good. So that's literally what I'm going to tinker with now. Well, going to cut this cable 1.5 inches. Then you get these wee fellas, you put that in the end of the wire, stops it fraying. So if the old gyro cable that I just took off earlier on had one of these on, it wouldn't have frayed. So this is to prevent this cable fraying for whoever owns it in future. Right. So before I adjust the springs, I'm going to make sure that everything is as lubricated as it needs to be, because if you're not lubricating your brake, you're allowing there to be friction where friction doesn't need to be. Friction is the enemy of a good working brake. Now on the lever you have these barrel adjusters, and on the barrel adjuster there's a slot to allow the cable to come out. That is the perfect place to pour oil in. And when I say pour, a couple of drops. So I'm actually going to disconnect the gyro here at the top, take the cables out to allow me to sort of pull this apart gently and drop some oil in. The brake will always thank you for more oil. It's one of those things you literally, if you oil your brake regularly, just in the cables and round where the brake pivots on the frame mounts, you will always have a brake that feels slick and nice. And I think it's worth it. So I'm going to pop the gyro cables back in. So putting all that oil in has removed as much friction as I can get. And now I want to adjust the springs, because these springs right now, the brake feels horrible and I want it to feel amazing. So the barrel adjuster on the lever, I'm screwing that right back until it touches the body of the lever. Those are very fragile, so you don't really want those screwed out. If you're adjusting your brake after it's in place, do it on this one because that's made of steel. Okay, so for this bit I need typically a 14mm spanner and a 5mm Allen key. Right now I'm actually making the springs weaker by reducing the tension, and the feel of the brake has just literally, it feels 10 times better instantly. If you have a young child, or if you're buying a BMX for a kid and they've got weak fingers, a strong brake spring is totally counterproductive. It just makes it difficult for them to pull the brake. And I actually don't think the brake ever needs to have a ridiculously strong spring. So that's feeling much better. But it has to be even. So if you imagine the brakes touching the rim, the pads, they have to touch at the exact same time. And if they do touch at the same time, it makes like a clack or like a slapping noise. That's one of my sort of indications of a well set up brake, if it makes that noise, which this doesn't yet. You hear that? It's getting better. So the brake is reset. The springs are at a mild tension. The brake feels amazing. I have no doubt that it's going to work well. And if it doesn't work well, it's a simple case of changing the brake blocks to a softer compound. But that is exactly what I want. Okay, I'm going to clean the back wheel now. I'll let you see a bit closer. So again, oily rag, just rubbing all the way around, taking all the dust and dirt off. And while I'm here, I'll do the sidewall of the tire. Makes such a difference to the look of it. Lovely. Okay, same again on the other side. And then in between the spokes. For all the time it takes to do it, it dramatically improves the look of the overall bike. It's like why people take their car to the car wash. It's that satisfaction of the cleanliness. Just makes you feel better about it. Now I am noticing here as I'm cleaning this that there's a little bit of corrosion around the spoke nipples. See if I can get you close up. So here is a little bit dirtier than I would like. See? So literally what I'm going to do now is, I'm sure if you haven't already guessed, the LWD-40 toothbrush is coming out. A quick rub either side literally just dulls that ugly look and takes it away. And then of course, yes, we are putting oil near the brake rim and we will rub that off. But for 2 minutes work, it'll transform the look of the bike. So if a toothbrush isn't currently in your toolkit, go and get one. There's plenty in the house. Before you throw an old one out, literally bring it downstairs, put it in your toolkit. And anytime you're cleaning intricate parts of bikes, drop a wee bit of WD on the bristles and crack on. Lovely. Okay, so clean rag time. Cleaning the brake surface so the brakes will actually work. There's the gack coming off. Okay, give it another wee rub over. That's looking good. These pegs are going to go back on, but they're slightly corroded, so I'm actually going to spray them. doesn't need a whole lot, literally just a touch up. In fact, I'm going to wipe it first. So the body of the peg is actually dead on, it's just the end of it. In fact, it's literally not even rusty anymore. This one I think is a wee bit worse. Nope. Don't need this. Not this time. So when putting the pegs back on, I'm going to grease the threads. These things are screw-on pegs, and they typically like rust on, which is a pain for everybody. So that's them greased now. The wheel's already set. Put them back on. Looks awesome. Okay, so back to the front of the bike. At this stage, before I put a front brake on and put a cable onto the lever, the stem bolts are pretty ugly, so I want to clean those. I'm going to take them all out. I'll give you a wee close up. Super rusty. You could just give them a wipe with a WD-40 and rag, however that's a lot of rust, so the rag wouldn't really do much for that. What we actually want to do is take it to the vise and completely clean it off. So I'm going to do these two at a time so that I don't damage my gyro cable by letting the handlebars flop around. So I'll show you a quick before and after. Boggin. I'm not tightening this vise very tight, by the way, just enough to stop them moving. There it is. So, what, 30 seconds? Nice and clean. I'm a huge fan of grease, so I'm going to grease these before putting them back in. Grease helps everything. Sorry, in a thread capacity, grease helps everything. Doesn't help your tires grip to the ground, but it will help. It allows you to tighten bolts tighter, but then it allows you to, after a long period of time, get a bolt loose without it actually snapping from being seized. So that's the first two done, do the second two now. This bolt in behind as well, the top nut for the forks, this one, that's rusty too, so I'm going to take it off and clean it. That's all the rust off the stem bolts. Well, the top ones anyway. Before I tighten them up fully, I'm going to make sure the handlebars are in the middle position, which they are. They're at a nice angle, which they aren't. General rule of thumb, if you're looking at a bicycle sideways, the handlebars should be in line with the forks in a straight line. Just like that. There's gaps at the front and the back. They should always be the same. So when you're tightening a stem, never tighten one side and neglect the other side. You always tighten them evenly. If you were to tighten them unevenly, there's a good chance that the stem won't actually be clamping fully on the bars and the bars might slip. So it's not just a look thing, it's a safety thing. These need to be good and tight. If you have the desire, you can go online and find what torque these need to be set to and buy a torque wrench. I've done it that many times. I have no intention of doing that. I can tell by feel, and right now they feel perfect. Right, so that's the fork top nut done too, nice and clean, no rust, always grease. Now the bolts at the back of the stem, here and here, these are still looking a bit rusty, so I'm going to fix that. They're getting cleaned now. Providing this top nut is left in, you can take these bolts out and nothing will come apart. This is called a compression bolt, so it's actually holding it all together. So I can take these out without worrying about stuff falling out on me. More grease. Once I take the bike off the rack and have it between my legs, I will then double check that the stem's aligned with the front wheel. This is just a wee tweak to get us to that point. Brake still feels great. Bolts are cleaned. Now I'm going to stick a front brake on. So I like this one. So, front brake. This can either be at the top or the bottom. Because the bike has a gyro and the cable will be coming from the bottom, these two have to change position. So I'm going to do that now. On slightly higher quality front brakes, these little boyos are interchangeable. So thread this off. And I'm literally just swapping positions. On a front brake, this little guy I'm putting on right now, the crimp part always goes to the front and the lock nut always goes to the back. Then this fella here, he also mounts backwards like that, so that the cable is going straight from there to there in a straight line. Right, tighten these up and put it back on. Now the cable can mount from the bottom, which it does when you use a gyro. So I'll show you where the front brake cable goes now. This can slap about. What you want to do is set it in the middle by your hands, by hand at this stage, and just tighten that nut up on the back. Not extremely tight, but tight enough so that it isn't flopping about. Like that. And then as we put the cable in, then you'll go back to that nut and pivot it around so that it opens perfectly. And there's an even gap on both sides. Right, so this is the cable I'm going to use for the front brake. It's not brand new, I had it spare from another bike. So this is one of those moments where I take something else apart, don't throw it away, and I can reuse it. In this case, I can't because it's too short. Hold on. This should be long enough. So, this bolt has got a hole in it. So I need to pull the cable back so that it's just inside the housing and no more. And then feed it down this hole till it gets to the bottom. Pull the wheel towards me and the cable pops out. Top and bottom. There's also a little lug thing here to put the cable into. I personally find that that is in a pretty horrible position where it kinks the cable too much and the brake doesn't feel good, so I'm actually not going to use that right now. I'll show you how to get around that in a second. So, This comes round and feeds in from the bottom. And then this is really fiddly, this bit. To get the cable into this, in the brake, is a pain in the arse. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to fit this to the cable now, and then put it back into the brake. So the end of this cable is ever so slightly frayed. Never fight with a frayed brake cable. It's just not worth it. So the fray is about 4 mil long. So I'm going to go 6 mil down the brake cable and just cut the fray off, and now the cable's perfect again. This will go on straight away. Like that. Then put it back in. This is a fiddly bit. I'm making this look hella awkward because it actually is kind of awkward. The reason why it's awkward is because my cable, I'm using a second-hand cable and it's ever so slightly too short. But rather than waste it, I want to reuse it. So I'm going to pull it up. I'm clamping the brake tight with my fingers, then I'm tightening this 10mm nut. Bosh, done. Now, that's not enough. You want the cable to look flat at that point. So I'm not swinging on this, but it's certainly not finger tight. Now we have a functioning front brake, and you can see from the video that only one side is moving. So don't want that. At the point of the handlebars here as well, this top cable is too long, so I want to feed more of it down into the forks. That allows this bottom loop to get a bit bigger, and instantly the brake feels better. Now I'm going to oil it. So again, into the little slot up at the lever, getting rid of as much friction as we can into where the cable goes. That literally feels levels better instantly. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to the bolt on the back of the forks and loosen that slightly and adjust the brake in the direction that it wants to be centralized. Now this is a fiddly process, so it might take a while. Sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it doesn't. How's about that? I don't know what it looks like in the video, but I can see those both moving equally on both sides. And that rubbing is this cable that I didn't put in that loop. So all I need is a cable tie. And wait till you hear this for a cool story. This is a cable tie that is not brand new. It's left over from whenever a brand new bike comes out of a box. So wouldn't be a man to waste cable ties. This doesn't need yanked really tight. It just needs tightened enough so that the wheel doesn't touch. And then snip off the excess and push it round the back so that it doesn't poke into anybody. So we have a brake that works nice and doesn't rub. What I want to do now is reset the brake block position because this wasn't set to these rims. So I'm going to do that now. So pull the brake in so that the pad's touching the rim, loosen the brake block, let go of the brake, move the pad to where it's in the middle of the rim, pull the brake again, tighten it up about halfway, then I put my thumb under the front of it so I can tighten it more and it doesn't move. Right. So in the process of readjusting the brake blocks, oh no, she's going good. That block's too high. That noise is actually these tiny little rubber things. There is a solution for that. So if you ever set up a brake and you hear this noise, that's the mold rubbers left over. Pointy nose pliers, literally pull them off. A little extra 30 seconds of work, but that's fine. Do it once, do it right. There is no negative impact whatsoever to pulling these off. This should actually probably be done. The fact that I'm having to do this is an indication that this is not an overly high quality tire. Couple still to go. Done. So because this brake hasn't been used in a while, I'm going to give it a little bit of oil on the bushes. I'm going to give it a little bit more oil down the cable. There really isn't such thing as too much oil on a brake. That looks good, feels good. I'm going to get my clean cloth again and come back to the handlebars because these haven't had a rub yet. Get the stem a nice clean, get the shine to come back up on it, get any grubbiness off it that has built up over the years. Just a wee subtle gyro mod. Now I see a tiny bit of a rusty mark, and I can't be doing all this work to leave a tiny wee rusty mark, so it's in there. WD toothbrush. And that is that. That's basically what a gyro does. It allows the brake to spin, and it works in every position all the way around. It's class. I have a tiny mark here on the forks that I don't particularly like, so I would imagine that is from it like simply rubbing off something. That's Autosol metal polish. Tiny drop of metal polish. And I mean like a speck. We'll take this mark off. Just like that. None there. Okay, so we are literally ready to take this down off the rack, and I have spied another rusty bolt. There can be no rusty bolts left at the end of this wee job. So this, a little bit ugly. There are two of them. The top one is fine. I'm going to give it another wee tweak because I don't want the bike falling off the rack. I'm going to loosen the bottom one, take it to the bench, give it a quick rub with the wire brush. A quick dab with WD. Quick rub with the dirty cloth, quick dab in some grease, back in. Look at that, spot on. Right, now haven't gone near the saddle yet, so I'm going to take my greasy rag. Thankfully this doesn't have any rips, and because it doesn't have any rips we can keep it on. So I'm just literally taking the dust off it, any marks off it. Give it a wipe with the clean cloth. And tiny speck of rust on that bolt. WD-40 toothbrush. I tell you, what a magic wee idea. It works so well. Okay, so I'm ready to take this off the rack now. So that's what I'm going to do. Straight away, I can see that the seat post has a bit of rust on it. I'll see if the magic eye rag does anything to that. Kinda, but it's not good enough. So we're gonna clean it more. And by clean it, I mean a really quick little blast of paint. Better, but it could be even better. So what I want to do at this point is teeny tiny amount of rust on the bolts at the side. WD toothbrush sorts that out. And then I am going to use the spray paint now and touch up the corrosion on the post. Now only the part of the seat post that sticks out of the frame. Done. That fast. Bit of grease down the seat tube. That will basically stop that ever corroding, rusting or seizing in future. I'm going to put it down to the height to which I've painted it, which is still a sensible usable height. That will dry in about 30 minutes. 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And the very, very last thing I need to do right now is pump the tires up. So I'm going to set these to 35 psi. Reason being, these aren't overly high quality tires. So if you don't have particularly high quality tires, I wouldn't whack the PSIs away up. I would keep it moderate. There are BMX tires you can get that go up to 100 PSI. These are 35 to 50 rated, so I'm going to go 35. Quick rub where the sun don't shine. And other than a little bit of TLC, I'm going to give the left pedal. That's us done, guys. So that was an hour and 18 minutes. An hour and 18 minutes. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I got to use my tools. I got to practice my bike maintenance craft. I paid 20 quid for the bike an hour and a half ago. I've spent an hour and 20 on it. A brake cable at £6, a front brake kit at like 15 quid max, and some grease and WD-40. I'm going to put this for sale for 135 quid, and I'm pretty confident it'll definitely sell. So if you have any questions, if you liked it, give us a thumbs up. Feel free to hit us up in the comments, and thanks for your time. Take it easy.